when I woke up, I noticed that I was lying on the floor. I'd have spit dribbling out of my mouth, and I was weeping. And I had not cried. This was when I was
Mm.
24, 25. I had not cried since I was a little boy, since I was 5 years old. And I said, I have everything I want in the world. I've got money. I've got more fame than I ever thought I would have. I never thought I'd be famous. I have women. I have cars. I'm on billboards. And I said, why am I waking up and I'm weeping?
Welcome to the Holistic Life Navigation Podcast, where we explore life through the lens of somatics. I'm Luis Mujica, a somatic educator who teaches people how to find safety in themselves. Your turn to learn begins now. Okay, welcome to the podcast, Dan Clark. Welcome.
Luis, thank you for having me. I'm excited, intrigued both to be here.
Yeah, I love this life I have where I have a podcast and I can watch something and be moved by something and then reach out to the person that moved me and get to connect with them. So this modern technology world is bringing me so many gifts, and this is one of them. Because I watched this series of the American Gladiators, and you were the prime individual through the entire series, and I developed such a just like a love for you, an appreciation for you, an
Mm,
admiration as I
mm.
saw you just sitting in yourself so confidently and openly and vulnerably, all these pieces coming together, through this whole journey you were on. So I just want to dive into it and talk about it.
Well, I appreciate that, and thank you, for having me here. The docu-series is Muscles and Mayhem, and it's on Netflix. There was another one which was more about the creator of the show, which was the American Gladiators documentary, which is on ESPN. So I just wanted to
Oh, good.
wanted
Yeah.
to clarify for the audience: Muscles and Mayhem on Netflix.
It is lit. I mean, it was amazing. The individuals, the characters, the people, you just so compelling. I can't remember the last time I watched something and I couldn't stop watching. I had to watch the whole thing. And I
What
guess I
Luis
wonder,
Luis,
yeah, go
what
ahead.
you said was so interesting to see me present there and fully authentic. It took a lifetime to get to that point.
Mhm.
And I think sometimes people think, oh, that's just an authentic person. Oh, they might have been born that way. But usually authenticity, I find when I meet people and they fully embody who they are. Everyone is still a work in progress, but to get to that point, it takes a lot of introspection, study, and deep work, and trying and failing, and for identity, I still struggle sometimes with who I'm supposed to be and who I am and what I want to do and what I want to put out into the world, but I've learned to listen
Mhm.
to that inner voice. Either something will come to me in a flash, and I say, "Oh, follow that." So a lot of times I'll be working on something, trying to say, "Okay, God, what's next?" I'm a creative. I put things out into the world
Mhm.
through speaking. I speak through writing, through books, through TVs, through movie. And sometimes I'm like, God, what do I do? What do I do next? And then I just listen. And eventually it comes to me in this weird process of trusting the universe, of listening to the muse and being open to hearing what the
Mhm.
muse has to say.
Me too. And maybe that's why I felt a resonance when I saw you. And for people listening that never watched the show because they were born after 1990, I was 5, and I remember it was on all the time. My dad was glued to it, so it was part of our life growing up. Tell the audience about the Gladiators, the American Gladiators show.
So American Gladiators was really the burgeoning of reality TV. It was the beginning of reality TV, and it was a sports competition show where weekend warriors, average Joes and Janes, could go against these larger than life athletes personified in us, the American Gladiators. And they went through these different kind of tests, physical test, and the person who won got a car, and $25,000. Now, much separate from the documentary series, Muscles and Mayhem, was a look back on that series. But it did have the creation story, but it also was the story of these people that I think people your age looked at and said, "Oh my God, look at them, how strong, how mighty they are. They're heroes. They're almost like action figures."
Hmm.
But it was almost looking inside, the action figure saying, "Oh, that action figure is human." And then if people had done the work, they could tell which I usually call a pain to purpose story. And I think when you watch the documentary series, you see more of that tinged with humor. Look, the guy who directed it was a guy named Jared Hess and Tony Vianucco, but Jared Hess is known for Napoleon Dynamite, that offbeat kind of humor where this unusual guy becomes a town hero.
Hmm. Hmm.
He has this really, really interesting way and a humorous way of getting into character that's not slapstick funny, but it resonates in a very authentic way. So we were very lucky to get him.
And what was interesting about Gladiators, but that was different from, let's say, WWF, was you weren't acting, you were really falling and getting hurt and working really hard. It was an actual athletic experience. Not that WWF isn't, but it wasn't as much acting. Is that correct?
You had a character you played, but the competition was not staged,
Correct. Correct.
right?
Yeah.
Where look, the wrestlers, those guys are tremendous athletes.
Yeah.
Just the outcome is scripted.
Yeah. We're
So
correct. That's what I mean.
it was
Yeah.
yeah, it was a mixture of both, Luis, where there was athletic competition, but your gladiators were a little larger than life.
Hmm.
For me, I played this character called Nitro, loud, explosive, cocky, arrogant, and there was a side of me that's like that, where I want to like give the guy an extra shove, or
Yep.
like, hey, you can't take me. There's a part of me that's very much like that, in a competitive state, but and I think that let me go and play. American Gladiators let me go and play and have fun with it, to let that macho kind of guy. But I don't know if I don't think that's who I am.
Yeah, of
Yeah,
course
as
not.
as a person. I
But how old were you when you were doing that?
24, 24 years
24.
old when we
Interesting.
started, 23, 24 years old. It was a lifetime ago. And at that time, I was just looking for a job, Luis.
So, when you think about that at 24, though, what was it like to look back and at 24, you were allowed to publicly let that arrogant part play and get rewarded and get loved? Like, when you look back at that, how did that serve you?
uh, I look back at it now and I just look back like it was fun.
Hmm.
I was a young guy. I was in Hollywood, to go out and be on TV, to be admired, to be applauded. When I look back in retrospect, I could see that it filled a lot of empty places inside that I didn't know at the time were empty.
Hmm. Hmm.
It, does that make sense?
100%. And wait, even when you think of that, because now you're this whole, I wouldn't even say you're a different person. You are, but you're a more integrated person. You understand parts of yourself that you didn't then. So when you say, I didn't know they were empty, what were some of the signs that you didn't see or couldn't feel in your body at that period that you look back now and say, wow, I was in pain or I needed this? What was that?
They were pretty easy. I was partying like a rock star,
Yeah.
I was doing a lot of different types of drugs, just partying. I considered it partying.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Hollywood in the 90s, there's cocaine, there was ecstasy, there was alcohol, there was flour, there was all these different things, and whatever you think of, I probably took it, and probably took things you never even heard of.
Hmm. Yeah.
Maybe. um and for me, it was just living my best life. I'm in Hollywood, I'm having a great time. And then there was this thing that started happening, is I would get high out of my mind. So you would drink alcohol, then you would also take an upper of some kind to kind of level it off.
Hmm.
And in the mornings, I would started to wake up, and I was lying there on the ground. All around me was the after effects of the party. There was booze, there was drugs, there was probably condoms. I was just laying everywhere for no reason at all. And when I woke up, I noticed that I was lying on the floor. I'd have spit dribbling out of my mouth, and I was weeping. And I had not cried. This was when I was
Mm.
24, 25. I had not cried since I was a little boy, since I was 5 years old. And I said, I have everything I want in the world. I've got money. I've got more fame than I ever thought I would have. I never thought I'd be famous. I have women. I have cars. I'm on billboards. And I said, why am I waking up and I'm weeping? And what happens once, you're like, oh, that's just weird. And it started to happen more often. And one day I was driving around in my car going down Hollywood Boulevard. And for no reason at all, I just broke out into this spontaneous tears,
Mm.
just driving. And I had to pull over because I was crying. And at that point, I knew something was wrong.
Mhm.
And that's when I raised my hand and I got help. And
What did that look like, raising your hand to get help?
for a big, strong guy back in the 90s who was this poster of, Rambo, Terminator,
Yeah.
all these masculine traits, to raise my hand and got help is why I started to go to therapy. I seeked out a therapist. And this wasn't the first time. I had a wonderful acting coach, Larry Moss, who thought everyone should try therapy.
Hmm.
And his class was like therapy. But
Hmm.
I said, okay. And all these cues, signs together said, I'm going to go. And I went and I found a therapist. And I found a female therapist because there was no way I was going to let myself talk about my secrets and my shame in front of a man.
Yep.
So I went and saw this therapist. And I literally walked into her office and she said hello. And I said hello. And I just started telling her everything,
Mm.
all the things I was ashamed of, my fears, my secrets, things I've never told anybody.
Hmm.
And I wept and I wept and I wept. I did this like 3 times.
Pause there a
And
minute because I want the men and women to really hear that part you said. I didn't want to tell my secrets and share my vulnerability with a man. Can we just look at that for a moment? Tell me what that was about.
I think back at that time, I had this idea that men were masculine. And part of masculinity was not showing your emotions or your vulnerability. I had categorized those as being weak.
Hmm.
You don't cry. You keep your chest up. You can handle anything. You're strong.
Hmm.
You're tough. You're invulnerable. Nothing gets you. You
Yeah.
keep going, man. You keep fighting. Hoorah! And that was the mentality that I had.
Hmm.
So the idea of showing another side of me that I wasn't familiar with, I wasn't comfortable with, I was afraid of, I had to do it in front of a woman. So back then, I would rather punch me in the face than talk about my feelings.
Mm.
Because a punch in the face, Luis, it hurts. I never want to be punched in the face. It hurts. But at least I knew what it was. I knew that pain.
That's right.
The idea to walk to the precipice and look over and jump and not know where that leads, not where I could be in control of something that I could handle with my physicality,
Hmm.
that part scared me because I didn't know what it was. It was foreign to me. Um,
So would you have said working with a man at that time, would you have said it would be scary, shameful? What would you have categorized that as if you imagined it?
I don't I don't know if I can categorize it like that. I would just say I knew instinctively that I wouldn't have allowed myself to be open and vulnerable.
Just when you had allowed it. Yeah.
I wouldn't have been able to have that same conversation.
Hmm.
Yeah, it would have been more, how you doing? Yo, hey, I good. Hey, what are you here for? I don't know. Some things were, kind of bugging me, so I thought I'd come here and check it out.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So I was trained myself to have different conversations with men than I could with women. And it's still that way today. You know, there,
Absolutely. Yeah.
there's, um, but it's changed. It's changed, but there's still some of that, we're dudes and this is what we talk about. I watched this show on Netflix recently. It was so fascinating. And I think we're all, it's called Baby Reindeer.
Okay.
Have you seen this?
No, I'm writing
So
it
it's an English or Scottish comedian, failed comedian or struggling comedian, and he gets a female stalker, but not in the Fatal Attraction way, where at the beginning it's kind of humorous, but he's a bartender, and this woman comes in, and she just is strange, but she laughs at him. Oh, you said that. Oh, and she ends up stalking him, but he can't stop her because it fills a part of him that he
up. Mhm.
desperately needs validation for.
Mhm.
And it's based upon a true story. And the last, I don't want to ruin it for everybody, but everyone should see it because the guy in the end realizes who he is, what he is, and he's so open and vulnerable in this
Mhm.
last scene. He was struggling and trying to become famous, to be funny, to do all these things, but it was all hiding who he was. But once he came out and said, "Oh my God, this is who I am,"
So
I'm
that's the piece where obviously you relate to because your experience. And I want to take you back to this 5-year old where you said, I haven't cried since I was 5. So can you give us that story of what happened when you were 5 and you cried?
So when I was 5 years old, my parents were divorced. My mom is Japanese. She's from Japan. She barely spoke the language. My father, there's three of us. And my father was a Marine. He was from Iowa. He was, Semper Fi, gung ho. He was, a tough kind of guy. And when they divorced, my father said to my mother, "Look, I get the boys. If you try to take my boys from me, I will deport you back to
Mhm.
Japan." They were living in America, and she
Wow.
didn't speak the language. She was scared. So I remember the day my father took us from my mom. And we were boarding a plane. I'm 5 years old. I'm in the plane looking out through the window, and I could see my mom on the tarmac of the airport. And back in those days, you could come out to the tarmac and she's waving goodbye and she's just crying. And I remember I was weeping uncontrollably because you were taking me from my mom.
Mhm.
And as I'm just crying on the plane, there's a guy behind me in a seat. And he looks at me and he just says, hey, young man. He said, "Let me see your muscle." And I have tears streaming down my face at 5. And I go and I flex my little arm, and up pops this little bud of a muscle. And he looked at me, and I'll never forget the words he said. He said, "You're a big boy." And he said, "Big boys don't cry." And for some reason, Luis, that worked. I stopped crying. I just stopped crying. And I said, "I'm a big boy. Yeah, I don't cry." And I took that with me, 5 years later when my older brother, Randy, was 12 and I was 10. He got into an electrical accident and he died in my arms, basically.
Mm.
And I remembered what that guy said on the plane, that big boys don't cry. And I would not let myself cry or
Mm.
grieve for my older brother. And what you need to know about my older brother, Luis, he was my hero. I was
Mhm.
comfortable in his shadow. He was my rock. He was the bigger one, the stronger one, the faster one, the more athletic one, the handsome one. And he was the one that I thought deserved to live instead of me.
Mm.
And after he died, I remember going over to the wall and just punching it. I'm 10 years old. I'm just punching it. And I'm just asking God, God, please take me instead. And I felt the tears. But again, I would not let myself cry because big boys don't cry. And I didn't really allow myself to cry until I found myself at 24 or 25 years old, lying on the floor at the height of my fame after a night of drinking, sitting there just weeping. So it was quite a journey. And then I spent the next, until today, unpacking that. I
Yeah,
still work with unpacking that. And I
of
lifted up
course.
the hood and I said, "Oh, okay." And I also became this guy, this big, strong
Well,
guy.
that's what I was going to ask you. Where did the grief go? Did it go into that? Where did that energy go?
So, for context, my mom, like I said, is Japanese. She barely spoke the language, and they're not an emotional culture,
Hmm.
right? They don't process their emotions. They swallow everything behind a smile and a courteous bow. My father, Marine, neither one of them never had one conversation with me
Mm-hmm.
about losing my brother.
Mm-hmm.
There was no consoling. There wasn't, oh man, you lost your brother. I'm so sorry he died, and you were there, just the two of you alone. And I'm just so sorry. It's going to be hard for you, son. And I love you. I'm going to be here for you. We're going to figure this out. It's going to hurt. It's going to, not one conversation. So I had to figure it out on my own. And the first few years, I was just very reactive to everything in my life. I just kind of sat back. I was quiet. I was shy. I just listened and looked. And I didn't have an identity, but I found an identity through sports. And it wasn't easy, but I noticed that there was something about putting on muscle. There was something about putting on size. And through my collegiate football career, my professional football career, through American Gladiators, I started to pack on this muscle. Back then I took steroids. They weren't actually illegal when I first took them.
Hmm.
It was 1990, maybe 19. No, it had to be the 80s. I'm sorry, it was in the 80s, late 80s. Anyway, so when I became this big, strong guy, I was 200 at my one point. I was 260 pounds of hard muscle. When I look back at it, as I started to peel away the layers, I realized that I had put on this meat suit. Is this meat suit of muscle, which was all to protect that little boy who was told that big boys don't cry. And eventually, through my journey of transformation and becoming who I am today, I realized that, maybe big boys don't cry, but men do.
Mm-hmm.
And if I could encapsulate my journey of being a human, I think that would be a key factor, would be understanding that masculine has nothing to do with emotion.
Right.
Masculine are the physical traits that you are born with, um, due to whatever sex you were born with. You have more
Hmm.
testosterone when you're born male than versus female, and that's what masculine is. It
Hmm.
just gives us a different traits, but has nothing to do with emotion. It shouldn't. Emotion and vulnerability should be non-binary, I guess would be the right word.
Hey, my friends. I created a space that is affordable, accessible, and anyone is allowed to join anytime, and it's called the Library Membership. The Library Membership is an online private platform that hosts dozens of my webinars, my somatic practices, private mini lectures, and movement practices. There's also a monthly sound healing, and you'll be invited to a weekly Tuesday live mini practice with me and other participants. You'll also be invited to be a live audience member in our monthly HLN team podcast recordings, where you'll take place in the Q&A that happens off air after the episode is filmed. For more information on this membership, click on the link below or go to holisticlifenavigation.com and click on membership and then library. You can join right now and you can cancel or pause your subscription at any time. I look forward to seeing you in there. Well, yeah, I mean, I always say fluid, but you could also say that
Fluid,
too.
yes.
But there's interesting, two things come up for me here. One is your meat suit, as you would call it, all this muscle. It was like a wall between the world and your tender parts. It was this kind of place that literally gave you protection. I've had the same experience. I work in trauma and nutrition. I put the two together often. And when I was in private practice, I would have the same experience with people who were overweight. They would notice as the weight started to go down, they were getting closer to this vulnerability, and the weight created this barrier between them and the
Mm,
world.
mm,
So I get curious, like when I was saying to you, where does the grief go? I was curious because grief is a force. It's like a lot of energy that moves through you when you lose two people like you did in such a big way. You didn't fully lose your mother, but you did as a child. And so I guess I wonder, can you see that as an energy that went toward, I'm going to put all this energy into weightlifting? You see what I'm saying? Besides versus
I could,
processing it?
Luis, I can say, looking back in retrospect, of course,
Yeah.
yeah, of course, I can see it went there, but it was always lying beneath the surface, and you sometimes when you get everything you want and you're still not happy and satisfied and you're still not fulfilled, then you realize, like, oh, this material success,
Hmm.
this fame doesn't fill those empty places inside. Oh shit, what's wrong?
Hmm.
Like I said earlier, why do I have everything and it feels like nothing?
That's right.
And I was happy. I didn't walk around. I wasn't this guy, and that's
Hmm.
what's so hard about self-deception, because you
Hmm.
don't see it, right? I was happy. People tell you I was the happiest, funnest guy. That I was Dan is, oh God, he's always in a good mood. Dan is great. And the same thing is interesting. I speak to young men a lot. I speak on the college speaking circuit, and the people in my life who I've known who have taken their own lives, and there's been quite a few, and most of them men. I know two women out of probably the 10 people in my lifetime who've committed suicide. They've all seemed very happy.
Hmm.
They've all seemed like things are going great. Most of them, like, they're going great. You look at those people, especially the men, you say, wow, that guy's got it together. A lawyer I knew, very successful, married to a television star. You thought this guy had it all. Two kids in private school, a house in the hill, and one day goes into his backyard, goes up in the hill behind his house, and bam!
Hmm.
It's like, what? What?
Well,
I could.
there's this cultivation of our exterior. It's like when you say all those things he achieved, everything you achieved, your muscles, such a cultivation of the external and not a lot of connecting to the internal. And I think it's interesting you say more men, than women, because it's statistics, more men commit suicide than anyone else. And I think what the second piece I wanted to bring up to what you were saying, I had this kind of campy term. I call it the cinematic drag kings. And it's this piece here. It's this socialized idea of what a man is, what masculinity is. And so you get this kind of externalized conditioning that says you have to be like this to be a good man, let's say. But you don't learn how to cultivate your inner world at all. And so there you are at 25, 26, on the floor of a hotel room or your homeroom, just hysterically sobbing. There's your friend going up to the hill and killing himself because there's no connection to the internal self. So I get curious of how you, I know you said you started sobbing, uncontrollably while driving. You raised your hand, went to therapy. What has the cultivation of your internal landscapes been like after only focusing on the exterior for so long?
I don't know if that's accurate. I think I was focusing on the internal, but I had not reached a crisis point yet. There
Tell
was
me more about that. What was
I
that
was
look like?
gently tilling the soil,
Hmm.
with the different, trying to get in touch with my Japanese culture, reading about Buddhism and Zen and meditation. There was
Hmm.
always that there. I was always a seeker of knowledge. Um, and I had also started writing right about that time as well. And there was this woman, Julia Cameron, who wrote
The artist
I
way.
can't. Yeah, The Artist Way, and I started writing right when I moved to Hollywood, because I felt like there were stories I wanted to tell that I'd yet expressed verbally.
So you were
And the
digging
artist,
into your internal world. You were doing that on the side.
oh yeah, yeah, I was definitely tilling the ground. I was definitely tilling the ground, but I have not gotten professional help.
What interests me, what I was saying is men tend to really learn how to cultivate the exterior world, like their successes, their bodies, things on the outside. And what I've found is when men start to cultivate that interior world, the emotions, the vulnerability, they become really beautifully balanced. Like how you opened up this conversation around being in your integrity, feeling authentic. This balance comes, you can go in and out in this fluid way. So I was curious, and I'm hearing this now, when you went into these moments of crying and it kind of woke you up that there was something deeper you haven't expressed or found, this tilling that you were beginning to do was kind of poking at that. Then it came up, and then you went into professional help.
Yeah,
What does it look like from that point to now to be with both of these parts of yourself to feel more balanced? Like what just people listening, what's that journey like?
so part of the tilling before raising my hand that maybe poke the bear, so to speak,
Yeah,
that
exactly.
woke up that recessed part of myself was through acting class. Through acting class, having to go into other characters a lot of times can provide us a window into ourselves because you put yourself in those circumstances. So the writing started a lot there when I had to do a one-man show.
Mm,
And it was scary, just to talk about my brother, to start to explore that which I hadn't explored. Uh, from getting help, so I think that I was tilling the soil all along.
mhm,
And I think that tilling that soil by writing, by meditating, by reading about Eastern philosophy, that till soil allowed to break through the rock and allow the little bud of being able to raise my hand to get physical help in a therapeutic setting, if that makes sense.
absolutely.
And yeah, from there it was the continuance of doing that. I went to that therapy. I remember 3 times, and I thought I was cured. I didn't know that you had to continually. I cried. I let it out. I told somebody I'm healed.
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't know that there would be the next 25 years of continuing to till that and to go deeper. And when I wrote my first book, the memoir, Gladiator, True Story of Royd's Rage and Redemption, it was such a cathartic experience because it's a memoir. It's not an exploitive book like,
Mhm.
this person was sleeping with that person. It was really, sometimes I wish I wouldn't have made it the backdrop be about American Gladiators. So more people would have
Mhm.
gone, oh, this is a man's journey from a little boy who was told that big boys don't cry to learning that men do, and
Mhm.
to learn to self-healing, to go through and understand that the reason that he wanted to be seen so much is he was suffering from survivor's guilt of losing his brother, thinking his brother should have been the one who lived. And that
Mhm.
idea is to be seen so much was because I was living for two. I had all that guilt for
Yep.
me being the one who survived, that I was pushing so hard to be seen,
Mhm.
right? Because I was living for him, my brother, my older brother Randy, and on top of that, this whole fear that he was the bigger one. What the hell is going to happen to me? So
Mhm.
it was complex, the journey, and the book was about that, and the idea again that I packed on the meat suit all to protect that little boy. And that was like, whoa, okay. And I've continued to do the morning pages. It's probably been 35 years now. I did them this morning
Mhm.
before I come, and getting in touch with getting the inner noise out. So the surface stuff. My process is I get the surface stuff out today. I have to, I had the podcast with Louise. Then when 12 o'clock, I have a pitch meeting. Da da da. Getting that stuff out to get to the good stuff
Mhm.
of how I want to be in the world and what I want to do,
Mhm.
and get back to that authenticity, also coupled with the gratitude practice. So I have that 5 minute gratitude journal,
Mhm.
which I love to tell you, Luis, I do it every single day, but it goes in, spurts. There's also another interesting documentary on Netflix where this therapist, Jonah Hill, who's an actor, had his therapist on, and they went through this process of Jonah Hill's recovery. He's an actor, and he had an interesting gratitude practice. And that gratitude practice was verbally close your eyes, verbally say out loud a couple things you're grateful for. So, uh, take a breath. Yeah, I'm grateful for my dog. Yeah, I love my dog. My dog Ricky, man, he's fluffy. He just makes me smile. I'm grateful for the sun, hitting my face. And then you think before you start to think of another thing, you say, I'm grateful for, before you let that thing crystallize in your eye, in your mind, you just let yourself sit in that feeling of grace and gratitude and let it
Mhm.
warm your body.
Hmm.
And that's a practice I just started doing like a year and a half ago. And it was really interesting where you feel that warmth in your, for me, I feel that warmth in my body. I feel it on my chest. It's a stirring, it's a tingling. And I just let myself sit in that grace. So for me, there's all kinds of tools I use every day. And still I'm an asshole some days, Luis.
Well,
Still
of
I'm an
course,
asshole.
I think we all are. But I like how you said you sit in the feeling of the gratitude and the grace, because that's, again, the audience is listening to this episode. Everything I teach is somatics. It's how does my body experience what I'm going
Mm,
through. And
mm.
so to somatically experience your gratitude is so much different than just thinking about what you have, but really feeling how it lands in your body. It transforms things.
I agree 100%. And sometimes what I like to do too is I like to sit, get still, and just say, thank you, feet, for carrying me today.
Hmm.
Thank you back. I thank different parts of my body.
Hmm. Me
Thank
too.
you, hands, for working and giving me the ability, and thank you, Dan, for being present today with Luis, for letting myself drop down and be authentic and not having the whole time to try to impress,
Hmm.
to try to be the funny guy, to try to be the
Yeah.
witty guy, to try to be the storyteller, to try to get people to like me.
I really appreciate that, because when you were saying at the time, everyone would say, Dan's so happy, so positive, he's so amazing, he could never be upset. And these are the people, who took their lives were similar. Really understanding impressing people can be a strategy, not really where we are naturally. And so when you say that to me right now, like, just to be here instead of trying to impress, it just sounds like such a relief, feels like such a relief in my
Yeah.
body.
And it was a shift for me when
Yeah.
I spoke that to you. And then I realized that I was, trying to not maybe trying to impress, trying to be a good storyteller
Hmm.
to which I think is important. So there's a balance there. I want to be a
Hmm.
good storyteller. I want to present well so it resonates with your audience, but not letting our conversation be about that. And then when I dropped into that moment, I felt a little wave of emotion come up in me and I got a
Hmm.
little teary-eyed,
Hmm.
because like, oh, this is what it feels like to be, present in this moment right now. And for me, when I can drop into those moments in my life and just be fully present and
Yeah.
just be like right now, when I speak to you, we're on a different energy length. Can you feel
Yeah.
it too?
Oh, yeah. My heart is just slowly
Yeah.
expanding. I feel this warmth right there in my chest.
Yeah. And I think people listening, if you listen carefully how you felt in the last minute or two, you'll get in that same feeling that we're in. If you've ever got like body work done,
Hmm.
I find after body work, I get up, whether it's physical or Reiki. I do more physical massage. Whenever I come up, my voice,
Hmm.
it's so grounded
Yeah.
in my
So deep,
body.
so anchored. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so anchored. And I come up and I'm like, wow, this is how I want to feel all the time. And a lot of the work in life for me is to find those moments where I'm being human and I'm being in that moment and I'm all in that specific moment.
Hmm.
If that
I
makes
really
sense.
appreciate that, because, I interview a lot of people, and there's times I can feel what the person's doing is just their story, not like a balance between I'm telling my story and I'm dropping and connecting. And I felt a shift with you in the last few minutes, and it felt really nice. And before that, what was interesting is I was going for that on my own end. I was asking you certain questions that I really wanted people to hear. But I actually, if I dropped into where I was just so enjoying listening and watching you. And so I felt that in my body. I said to myself, I'm just going to release the questions for the rest of the interview and just connect to this man to see what comes through. So it was interesting how we were both kind of going through that in our bodies without telling the other.
You know what, as I'm sitting here in this space with you, Luis, what also is interesting is I think, a lot of times man to man. So you allow this space.
Hmm.
That's your work, right?
Yeah.
But for a lot of times, man to man, it's hard for two men to get into that space.
Yes, it
And I think
is.
it's also hard if you know if you identify as heterosexual, it's oh wait, some I'm being vulnerable and open with this guy. That oh that's is that uncomfortable for me? And I think with again, if you're heterosexual, if it's with a woman and I'm in this space with her, it's confusing sometimes
Mm-hmm.
because it could be deemed as sexual.
Hmm.
That connotation
Absolutely.
of saying it's sexual, but it's not. It's intimacy.
It's intimate. Yeah. I love that you're
Yeah.
saying that. That was my
It,
biggest fear growing up was allowing intimacy with a man, like platonic intimacy, like we're having right here, that would come off as different to him and I would get beat up or exiled for that. And so
mm,
I'm glad that you're giving words to that 'cause that's a
mm.
big barrier for a lot of men.
Yeah, it really is. And I'm learning something. I'm learning that too. But again, I think you allow that space.
Yeah, I
If I
try.
was sitting with Joe Rogan, I don't think that space would be allowed. It's just not there. You have that energy where you're present, where you got present in your body. You sit back. You have these wide, big blue eyes. You have this, and it's just very open, face. So it's comfortable to be there. Where I think with a lot of men, it's not because they would um, think of it as something sexual, and they're
Hmm.
like, "Oh, I'm not
Hmm.
gay. I cannot be in that space with that man."
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And
That
I
makes
really
sense.
take what you're saying to heart because 2 years ago is when I started officially doing work with men. I always
Mm,
worked with a vast amount of people, whoever wanted to work with me. But 2 years ago, I felt this inner calling to just kind of market and direct toward men for a little bit with certain offerings and circles and groups for this exact reason for me to work through my fear and my story that I can't be intimate with another man. And for men to experience, I can be intimate and it's totally safe, nothing bad's going to happen to me. So thank you for feeling that and for seeing that, and thank you for your existence. We have to close, I know, but I wish I had more time with you. Maybe in the future we'll connect. But I just love your existence and your story and the way you held yourself, just like you did in this interview, but in the series was really what attracted me to you. It was this anchoring into your body in such a kind, gentle way. So just thank you for modeling it for so many of us.
yeah, Luis, it can be challenging. I speak for me because I have this need to be liked.
Mm,
I have this need to be loved and to be thought highly of.
mhm,
That's this thing, and it's balancing that need, to be like, oh, Dan's a successful one. Oh, look what he's done. Look what he's got.
mhm.
It's balancing that with, being your authentic self and in the moment.
That's right.
How do you balance ambition with authenticity? And is there a balance? What does that look like? And maybe next time we chat, that'll be something we'll dig into.
I'm writing that down because I think that's an excellent thing to play with. Ambition and authenticity. Because there's this idea that if you're authentic and content, you don't need to do anything. And I think there's a way to be really content and real and integrated and have fun with something you're motivated to do or a goal or something you want to create. I think to go between the two is something I rarely hear anyone discuss, usually one or the other.
Yeah, if you look at that baby reindeer, you look
Yeah.
at when he finds in the last episode, his authentic self and the world opens up to him.
Yeah.
He exposes it's so it takes a minute to get there, Luis, but
Mhm.
when you get there last night, I was watching it with my partner and we both were. I was like, had tears, and I was like, this. I understand this now. I
Mhm.
understand. It resonated so much, but I understand he finally, in his authenticity, got everything he wanted, and it was so interesting to me. It's so interesting to me how you balance those.
Well, I'm gonna reach out to you to talk about that. That's gonna be a good one.
Yeah, we'll both be open to what we hear and what we
That's what I
see.
mean. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
gonna
that'd
I'm
be
gonna
cool.
watch it first, and then I'll schedule that interview with you around that piece. I'm
Yeah,
excited about that.
Because like if you look, I look in my business, in the entertainment business, I look at people who seem very authentic, like Steven Spielberg.
Hmm.
He just seems like a very authentic dude. He makes his pictures, he does his things. He would drop into my acting class, and you just like he'd just be there like a person, right? And you look at other, I think, performers, they just seem like very authentic and
Hmm.
comfortable in their skin.
Hmm.
That's the way it appears to me. And maybe that is the key to having success in whatever area you want.
Whatever, exactly. I feel that. I really feel
Yeah,
that.
whatever.
Beautiful, beautiful, my friend. Thank you so much for your time. Really, really
Cheers,
excellent time
Louis.
to be
Thank
with
you
you.
for having me. And thank you for allowing me to drop into that space with you. I needed that.
That's the end of today's episode. Now let's take a moment to notice where we feel the episode in our bodies. Close your eyes. Take a breath. And let whatever wants to come up, come up. And remember, those sensations hold the wisdom that we're looking for. If you want to go deeper, visit holisticlifenavigation.com.